Today I'm joined by Byron Smith of XSpace Group. How's it going today, Byron?
Very well, thanks.
Not necessarily XSpace, makes it sound like it could be part of Elon Musk's group or something like that, but it's not quite as while it's visionary. It's visionary in the storage and commercial real estate space, not so much in the space technology world. So, why don't you
Yeah.
kind of give us the lowdown of about you and about the business?
Um, yeah, I mean, actually, our name was a placeholder name that we thought was a placeholder name, and I brought in the former chief marketing officer of Aston Martin because in my previous life I was in the automotive industry, and he really liked it. But yeah, when Elon turned up into Austin, and then there was everyone's mild dyslexia kicked in. People get it confused with the other space XSpace. So anyway, yeah. So I mean, my background is in automotive. So I'm not really from the real estate industry originally, but my partner was building this type of asset, this type of industrial product in Australia. And so what XSpace is a market adaptation from the Australian market where it's been a big success. So we've brought it to America, but we've made it, bigger, better, faster, stronger. Texanized it, if you
I was
will.
gonna say that's the kind of way that Texans and Americans like their things bigger, better.
I mean, I'm not bullcrapping when I say it as well. That's literally what it is. It's taking that bigger, better, faster, stronger, and that's what XSpace is. It's an evolution of that, and it evolved over the process of construction, just using what we were seeing with customer demand. But essentially, they're called. I suppose we define them as commercial condos. They're mini warehouse space that can be used anywhere from 300 square feet for an individual all the way up to 3,000 square feet for a business. We've got some local celebrities and high net worth guys in there that use it for their cars. But whenever there's an application for cool warehouse space in a highly secure building, that you own rather than lease, then that's where we sit. So that's the concept of XSpace, if you will.
Sure. You mentioned kind of from your partners back in Australia, and obviously it doesn't sound like you have a Texas accent per se. So,
Yeah.
what's a little bit about your background? What was the journey to get you here to Austin, Texas?
Yeah, so I grew up in Australia. My first business was a race car company in Australia, and that started off with 4 or 5 cars. That was my first job out of university, or first business, I suppose. And it started with 4 or 5 cars, not knowing what was going on, and then turned that into the largest motorsport dealership in Australasia. So that was my first thing. From there, I moved to London. I did my MBA in London. I started an analytics company there, which morphed into a consulting business, which is based in Sydney. And then I was in New York at the time, and we had just purchased the land with cash here in Austin as our first project. And because we were trying to do I was living in New York, and we were trying to do XSpace in LA and New York, and we're just like, this doesn't work, like something's off here. We just like, it's expensive, and and I ended up in Houston one Thanksgiving, and I was having a margarita, and this is somewhat of a known story now, but I was sitting at El Tiempo, I think, and I was looking out, and there was a sort of a B-class building there. There was a church next to it with a school, and then a strip club. And I said to everyone, I was like, hey, there's a strip club next to a school here. Isn't that a little bit on the nose? I thought, like, why would someone let that happen? And they said, well, welcome to Houston. There's no zoning. So I was like, aha, all right. So we came down to Texas, and we did a scoot round of Houston and Austin, ended up in Austin just because we thought it would be it's a bit more of Austin's a more, embraces innovation a little bit better than, say, other cities. So that's how we ended up in Austin. So that's where the building is. We started the building, and then I was in New York, and then a little bug went round at the start of 2020, and New York was not a good place to be. So we moved down to Austin, and that's the end of that story. We've been in Texas, and intend to build the business out of Texas.
Nice. Yeah, Houston is definitely unique in their kind of lack of building codes and kind of just the free for all that it is there. And so that catches, I think, a lot of people off guard if you first move there, if you're not familiar with the area. Which I don't spend a lot of time there, but being in real estate myself, like enough about some of the other parts of Texas, and it's just kind of like no building restrictions. Like I'm all for not too many things. Like we don't need to get over the top, but like no, pretty much like you say,
Yeah, you think there was something, one thing,
yeah. There'd be a little bit more.
No, and then you wonder why they flood every bloody 2 years,
Yeah.
right?
So what got you mentioned your first business was the race car business. Was what got you? What made you decide that? Was it something you'd always loved? Loved cars?
Yeah, I've always loved cars. My dad was always into cars. Like, so me and my brother were always into cars. Quite honestly, it was accidental. It wasn't anything planned. It was a total accident, and I did it because I wanted to be just part of the deal and part of it, be involved, and that's really how it started. It wasn't anything major, but then I was good at it, and I was good at look, if you look back at it, my background is basically a used car salesman, right? So if that's how it sort of started. The automotive thing was total accident, but it showed that I had a skill set, and I liked doing certain things within the business. So we just ran with it.
Not quite the same as some of the F1. Was like Lance Stroll's dad buying the team, so he can be a part of it that way. But
no, my dad wasn't a billionaire. My dad wasn't a billionaire and buy Aston Martin so that I could have a race seat in Formula One. But
you're like, I gotta start it from there. But I want to be involved, so you're gonna have to try to start something from the ground up.
I gotta do it a little bit more humbly, yeah.
What made you want to, like, say, move to London and then the States from there?
I followed from London, that was just I wanted to be there. Like, I was doing a lot of work in London with the race cars because everything was coming out of Europe. So I always wanted to be there. I wanted to move to London and take the experience. And then I did my MBA in London and stayed there for a bit. And then we opened up an office in New York. And again, I wanted to live in New York and enjoy those big cities. So it was more sort of combining, I suppose, the biggest and the best cities in the world with progressing the career.
Sure. And once you move from Australia to London, going from London to New York, so pretty simple.
London to New York's much easier than Sydney to London. Yeah, it's also geographically a lot closer. Yeah, no, for sure. For your partners in the business, was that you mentioned was the one guy from Australia? Like, were they just people that you had met kind of along the way, or in Austin we obviously have a pretty good startup culture. There's a lot of times that people come up with an idea for a business, and then through trying to reach out to investors or different things, you sometimes tend to partner with people that you didn't necessarily know. But it sounds like in your case, it was at least some of the investors, or some of the partners were people you knew. How did that kind of relationship build? Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the principal relationship that got this business from idea to execution was Howard Ecker, who's our chairman, and he's known me since I was 0. So my dad has done business with him for I don't know, how old am I? 38. Yeah, 38 years. So he's my dad came over to bring tenant rep from America to Australia, and that's what he did. And he built a big business and sold it. And Howard Ecker was the one that partnered with him, and was one of the pioneers of tenant rep in, amongst other things, amongst many other things, but he was a pioneer of tenant rep in North America, based out of Chicago. He's our chairman. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of startups that sort of have to like just, have got an idea and they need to do whatever it takes to get from point A to point B to point C. From us, it was more like, well, we're doing this thing and we're doing it with people that we know and trust. Which, I mean, I think in hindsight is a very, it's a good thing, because you go through a lot of ups and a lot of downs, a lot more downs than you do ups. And having people that you trust that have the same value system as you is that's when it sort of all gets tested. But,
No,
I mean, like it's like with our building, we had everything in place, and then COVID hits, and no one wants to give you money, no one wants to give you debt, no one wants to do a deal. You do whatever you need to do. So
no, definitely, like I say, because starting a business, starting a company is so challenging, and there are, like you mentioned, a lot more failures than successes to get to ultimately being successful. Having a core group of people working towards the same goal that you trust and that are aligned with what you're doing is awesome. It definitely can sometimes make it a little challenging if there's those pre-existing relationships, though, too, because then for some people it can make it harder to want to make the tough choices on different things. So but in general, I think it's usually a good thing when you have that previous relationship, because it does make navigating a lot of other things a lot smoother.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree. There's pluses and minuses with it all, but at the end of the day, like if you're in the trenches, you want to be with people that you trust rather than people you just met networking.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned your dad also starting a business is kind of how he went to Australia to begin with. So has being an entrepreneur, or kind of that mindset and mentality, just been a part of your life, always kind of growing up? It's always interesting to me to see kind of the paths of people who, go into business for themselves versus, maybe go to school and, go into corporate America. And a lot of times it feels like it's kind of something that is generational in a lot of places, where people, have this idea or see what their parents have done, or have at least that freedom to kind of do things on their own. And then other people where it's like, hey, this is, go to school, get the education, go get a really good job at a great company, and kind of go that route. Was that always something that was welcomed and fostered, to kind of go out and do your own thing that way?
Yeah, very much. I mean, you don't realize that at the time, but yeah, like that.
It's just life, right? Like, it's not
It's
necessarily
like, yeah, I
pushed on
mean,
you.
like from when I was very young, like my dad made me, like, I was washing the car. I liked washing the car with him, and he would make me then, well, not make me, but like he would encourage and say, hey, like, why don't you go walk around the block in the neighborhood and wash other people's car, and you can make like $5. And so, like, on the weekends, I would go and, make money by washing other people's cars and doing that sort of stuff. And, he would push me to do those type of things in other areas as I grew up. And then I think obviously when you have that influence of someone who's successful, they allow you to have the platform to go and do those type of things. And you have these skill sets that you never think about that you're building up, but you do. So, and even in that first business, the race car business, it was understanding an entire business, from how do you run the accounts to making sure that you get the money in, to making sure that you're doing, not just structuring and doing deals, but like every single aspect of a business, how that interplays with each other, right? So, yeah, absolutely. That had a huge influence in like how I did my things and how I ended up where I am, for sure.
Yeah, like you mentioned, how when COVID hit, you got a lot of no's for the business there. I'm sure you probably got a few no's when you were walking around asking for car washes, and so it builds up
Yeah.
that ability to like not take, because a lot of people have a hard time, asking the question, because they know they're probably going to get a no, and that feels devastating to a lot of people. But for entrepreneurs, it's generally something that they're just kind of
Yeah.
water off the duck's back.
I think, yeah, I mean, if you take that thought to its like nth degree, I mean, I think being an entrepreneur in essence is not it's a mindset and a lifestyle choice. It's not there's skills that go around it, but I wouldn't classify them as particularly like hard to obtain.
Sure.
But I would just say it's from my perspective, like it's a mindset and it's a lifestyle choice. And like, if you're going to do something, then it's going to get done one way or the other. And like, if you have that outlook on life and that's what's going to happen, then, then that's how I sort of, see it or believe in it. So.
Sure. I know you guys are in the process of getting your Houston space open up as well too. You obviously mentioned the kind of lack of zoning that happens over in Houston. Are there any other kind of differences or similarities that have kind of stood out to you between Austin and Houston as you're getting that second project up?
Yeah, I think that I think doing business in Houston is just getting stuff done there. I think is a little easier than in Austin.
Sure.
I think Austin's a great lifestyle city and a great city to be in. And they've, as a developer, they do put a lot of restrictions on you from like how long things take to get done, from impervious cover, so that the place looks beautiful. And like, but doing business in Houston, it's all business. That's all they do, right? So it's been good. I think it's been good in that sense, and I think that it will be a quick, positive construction process. But I would say like, yeah, it's been easier than Austin, but I would just say I would just classify it more or less sort of Austin versus Houston. But I think doing business in Texas is excellent. I think just doing business in Texas relative to New York, right, or relative to California or many other states, I think is just a very embracing, forward-thinking, entrepreneurial thinking kind of state, and you can get stuff done.
You mentioned initially when you're in New York, the thought being that you would, New York and LA might be the places you would initially going to build these. How far down the path did you get? Was it something where you just kind of, as you try to go down that path, it was just super challenging to even get the ball rolling, or was it not even something where you got too far down that path before realizing Texas was the place?
No, we went pretty far down the path on one or two deals in LA, putting together drawings and stuff like that. But I suppose the thing that kills you in those deals is, it's 2 to 3 years to get a permit, and, land is 2 to 3 times more expensive. I mean, that's basically the end of it. So you can do it there, but, if you're trying to do what we're doing, which is, show everyone that there's demand for what you're doing, do it in a quick and effective way, buying land at a decent rate, and being able to have quick permitting processes like you do in Houston, Dallas, lesser extent Austin, but still relatively quick, then, that's how it ended up. So New York was just like the price of land was too much. So that was a pretty quick decision. But LA, I mean, when I say LA, I mean like, or anywhere from downtown LA to Orange County, right? Like what there's a swathe of space and opportunity down there.
Yeah.
But
But like you say, with it being so much more expensive, and then with the delays to try to get something done, like you have that huge carrying cost
massive
of the land that you can't purchase any kind of return on for a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, you got to basically put down this, $5 million for land, and then you've got to spend 2 years of not getting paid and then paying everyone else to get a building done. It's it's somewhat prohibitive.
Sure. What so like with the space you have here currently in Austin, like what kind of businesses have been, or individual, I mean obviously not like specific individuals, but like what has been kind of the mix of the owners and tenants for the space there?
Yeah, so if I just go through it, it would be, I'll just go through actual people that have purchased or are leasing, but you've got production companies who do, video, photography, podcasting studios, like just media production in general, because that suits that space. So that's down there. We have an interior profile interior design group that have got two spaces together, and they're combining them for their sort of office slash, sort of officey kind of showroomy kind of stuff.
Sure.
We have local entrepreneurs who might have like 2 or 3 businesses, and they're like, this is my hub. So you have a bunch of that, people with like a few interests. People that buy it as an extension of their home office. So again, sort of people that have like a lot of interest, but they might not have an office, or their office might be downtown. So they like use it as another way of me saying satellite office. We have property developers who are using it there as their chairman's office. So we have a handful of guys doing that. And then we've got a bunch of, as I sort of said, celebrities or high profile, high net worth people that, blast through and have big space that use it for car, gym, man cavey sort of places, because it is very secure, very discreet. The guy Bo, who owns the Oasis up on Lake Travis, he has a big space down on the corner there, beautiful space there that he leases out. And then I'm just trying to think, that sort of covers it. It sort of leans a little bit to the office. And so sort of really moves away from like, traditional storage, though,
Sure.
Though it is. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Man cavey. So did anybody throw any epic Super Bowl parties over the weekend then with?
I was away, but I do know like Thursday nights up in the lounge are kind of known because there's a bunch of ex-NFL players who live around the area and have space in there. So we have 2 big screens up the top in the lounge. So they usually Thursday nights there usually get
good place to go watch.
Good place to go and see some people.
So it'll be interesting if they stay with that routine now that the season's over and they have to wait.
They'll find something else.
another reason to come on Thursday nights and just kind of get away and unwind. You mentioned that the lounge area too. I was fortunate enough to kind of tour the place not that long ago, and the view itself, like there's, you don't have to be up there watching TV by any stretch of the imagination. Like just be able to see the view and actually see Lake Travis and everything is a pretty cool spot that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the lounge is one of those things we talked about at the top of the conversation is one of those bigger, better, faster, stronger bits that I mentioned, having the 3,000 square foot lounge with a terrace that looks over Lake Travis that's, basically free. That's an amenity, a costly amenity, but something that's like, okay, well, that differentiates us from someone, from anyone else really. So you basically have a free WeWork to, do work by day, happy hours by night, or, product launches, by weekend. So
so like you mentioned too, it definitely differentiates. So the people that want to work there, and then if they'd want to bring in clients or do things that way, like that's not not something, especially out here. Like if you do some of the shared space downtown, yeah, great, you can get some cool downtown views and different things. But that's we're out by the Mansfield Dams a bit of a ways away, and so it kind of gives it just a different vibe, a different feel, but can still be a really engaging space for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what are kind of obviously Houston is the one that's on deck here to kind of get going, as well as finishing out. I mean, there are still, I know, spaces available in Austin, but what are some of the plans kind of moving forward from there?
Yeah, I mean, we will make our announcements about Houston and other projects close by, I think, in the next few weeks. But really, for us, it's about building up our pipeline. We have, a bunch of projects in the pipeline and some partners, some pretty high profile partnerships. So for us, it's about watch this space probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks, and you'll just start seeing some announcements about like where we're going to be next and what we're up to. So it's exciting because we have this downturn, which will be last probably this year. But I have an economics degree of enough friends from London and New York who really understand the markets in depth. And from what I've read and what I understand, this downturn will sort of be mild and short, and it will probably last this year, which gives us a great position because we can go and belt out, a bunch of projects while things sort of slow down a bit, and then we can emerge on the backside of this really with a handful of world-class projects, and then ride this next cycle up. So it's exciting time.
Yeah, no, and it's definitely one of those, like, say, if you have the backing and have that confidence, like, now is a good time to be building. It's obviously probably a tougher time to maybe raise some of the investment side of things, but a good time from the building standpoint. So that way, when things do fully kind of turn, you're ready to go versus now starting to try to ramp up, like I'm sure a lot of companies will do at that point in time. Like, oh, wait until we know everything's good. And now if you have to start the construction process, now you're kind of behind where you guys hopefully will be ahead of everyone.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think from where we've seen, from what we did in COVID to basically like the highest prices of construction, ever, literally, prices of steel and lumber and what we did for the Austin deal. It is an opportune time to sort of let the debt market settle a little bit and then go start building. And to your point, in the next 18 months, we'll be 18 months to 2 years ahead of everyone.
Have you seen much change in the start of the year with interest in the commercial space? I know on the residential side of things, it's definitely been kind of a renewed, at least, interest in the residential market, where for the second half of 2022, everything was pretty dead. People were worried about their jobs. People were worried about rising interest rates. And again, it'll be interesting to see if there's always, in residential, there's always kind of some of that renewed interest at the start of the year because it's kind of a planning phase for a lot of people. Like, what are our plans for the year? And so people start to think, well, maybe buy or sell a home. And so there's always renewed interest, but it's good that we're at least seeing that, because again, we didn't see much of any interest the second half of last year. But it'll also be interesting to see if that turns into actual business. Like, it's definitely not going to be as crazy of a market as it was in 2021 or early 2022 on the residential side, but it does feel like, for January already, prices were slightly ahead of January 2022. And so like it feels like prices are going to stay relatively flat. The number of sales will decline, but that it's going to be picked up from where it was the end of last year. You guys seen anything dissimilar in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, we the only thing that impacted us was people that like the micro reality of, from our perspective, was there were people that really wanted to be in our space that had deposits down, and interest rates went up so sharply, sharper than anyone had ever seen, and they went from being able to afford it to like being a stretch, and they moved from buyer to leaser. But I suppose since people started coming back online in January, everything started going back to normal, smoother, and like particularly as far as like our pipeline of inquiries. So it's coming back, but I don't think anyone should expect it to be the boom what happened in like 19 and 20. Like, I don't think that's not reasonable, but I think that it's back to a bit more stability. I think people were very spooked at the end of last year. So.
For people that are trying to find out more, what are the best ways to kind of find out more, stay in touch, to hear some of the announcements coming in down the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, I think just going to xspacegroup.com, everything funnels really digitally through xspacegroup.com. So announcements and I'm trying. Announcements, but also sort of if you want to get onto the social platforms and see up-to-date stuff, it all funnels through there. So that's the best place to keep tabs on what's going on and reach out if any of these XSpaces are popping up in your city as well. So
Nice, cool. Well, I appreciate the taking the time to jump on. I know it's been busy in good ways for you with all the investor stuff and just anytime you're running a business, there's always things going on. So really appreciate it and look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks, Troy. Appreciate it.
Hope everyone has a wonderful day.